Hello and welcome to Jason's Macintosh Museum. I'm Jason, your host, and today we're looking at a Macintosh Quadra 950 from 1992. Now I suppose the first thing you notice when you look at the Quadra 950 is its sheer size. It's a very large machine physically, which is actually why I've had to zoom out quite a bit to get the whole system in frame. But that really tells the story of the Quadra 950. It was designed to be Apple's flagship system, the most powerful and the most expandable, in fact, when it was launched. Now, the 950 replaced the Quadra 900, which came out in 1991 as part of Apple's new Quadra line of systems, and the Quadra systems were the first to make use of Motorola 68040 CPU. Now the 900 looks almost identical to the 950. The only difference really is that in the 950, Apple increased the clock speed of the CPU from 25 to 33 megahertz, and they also improved the onboard video, making it quite a bit faster than it was on the Quadra 900. But other than that, the two machines were more or less identical. They both came in this huge case, which was really meant to sit on the floor rather than on your desk. And they also both featured the Motorola 68040 CPU, which was quite a bit faster than the equivalent 68030 CPU. And having a case of this size also meant that it was among the most expandable models of Macintosh that you could buy at the time. And in fact, you got a total of 5 NuBus expansion slots with the Quadra 900 and 950. And you also got a processor direct slot for CPU upgrades. You also got a whopping 16 memory expansion slots, which meant you could take the memory up to 256 megabytes if you wanted to. And you also had space, as you can see, for a 5¼ inch front mounted device. It was originally designed for a tape backup drive, although you can put any other SCSI device you want, such as a CD burner in this case. And it's also worth noting that the Quadra 950 was on the market for over 3 years, in fact. It was introduced in March of 1992, but it wasn't discontinued until October of 1995, by which time many faster systems, including the first Power Macintosh series of computers, had already come out. But the reason the Quadra 950 was on sale for such a long time was simply because of its case and its expandability. The fact that you got 5 NuBus slots, which no other Macintosh model at the time could accommodate, was certainly a big factor in that. And as well, the 950 was very well suited to be used as a server, because internally you actually got 2 separate SCSI buses. And in addition to that, you got this very neat little key switch, which I'll talk about in a moment. So, the specifications of the Quadra 950. It was launched in March of 1992 and discontinued in October of 1995. It had a 33 MHz Motorola 68040 CPU, which had a built-in floating point unit. It came with 4 megabytes of system memory as standard, expandable up to 256 megabytes through the use of 30-pin SIMs. And in fact, the 950 has a total of 16 SIM slots, so there's certainly plenty of expansion room there. You also got a single PDS processor direct slot for CPU upgrades or adding a level 2 cache, and you got a total of 5 NuBus expansion slots. And in fact, the only Macintosh models ever to offer more than that were in fact the original Macintosh 2 machines, as in the 2, the 2X and the 2FX. They offered you 6 NuBus slots. Now the hard disk, you could choose different sizes ranging from 230 megabytes up to 1 gigabyte, but they're all SCSI of course, and in common with the Quadra 900, the 950 has 2 separate internal SCSI buses, so it's obviously well designed for use as a server. You also got a 1.4 megabyte SuperDrive and an optional CD-ROM or tape backup drive in the lower drive bay. I should also mention, with regards to the specifications, is that the Quadra 950 that I have appears to also have composite video input and output capability, because as you'll see in a moment on the back, there are 2 RCA sockets, one for composite video in and one for composite video out. But strangely, if you look up the specifications on the 950 online, it's not mentioned. At least I couldn't see it mentioned. So I don't know, maybe there's a special AV version of the 950 that, that I happen to have. I'm not sure. I don't know if all the Quadra 950s had that facility. I don't know, but I'm sure someone else who has a Quadra 950 will let me know. So that's about all there is to say of the Quadra 950. So what we'll do now is we'll have a closer look at it. Here is the front view of the Quadra 950, and as you can see, it is a very large and tall machine. It's obviously designed to sit on the floor rather than on your desk. So looking at the front, starting from the top, we have the power LED up in the top left. Moving on from there, we have the built-in 1.4 megabyte SuperDrive, and then over to the left, we have the key switch, which is a rather unusual feature, and it was only ever used, I believe, on the 900 and 950. Now, the way it works is it's really designed for when the Quadra is in use as a server. In the normal position, you can see position 1, the machine can be powered on and off, and the keyboard and mouse are operational. But if you move the key to position 0, that will lock out the power buttons along with the reset and interrupt switches as well. So it means that you can have the Quadra 950 powered on, flip the key, take it out, and no one will be able to power the system off, at least not without pulling the power cord out. You can also switch the 950's key switch into the lock position, and that will lock the keyboard and mouse so that you can have the Quadra 950 running as a server but lock out the keyboard and mouse so that no one else can mess around with the machine. So we'll leave it in position 1 so we can power it on. And then moving on from there, we have the lower drive bay. It's a 5¼ inch drive bay. Now, this allowed you to have an optional tape backup drive or CD-ROM. In this case, I fitted an aftermarket Yamaha CD burner that I happen to have. Mainly because when I got this Quadra 950, there was nothing mounted in the bay at all and there was no cover. Thankfully I had a spare cover I could put in there and a drive to install. And then below that we have the Apple logo and Macintosh Quadra 950 name tag. Over here we have the reset and interrupt switches. And there's not much else to see on the front apart from the bottom section where we have the grill for the built-in speaker, and possibly an air inlet as well. I'm not quite sure, but I do know the speaker does mount just behind there. So that's the front of the Quadra 950. There's not much to really look at on the side, so we'll switch around and look at the back. Here's the rear view of the Quadra 950, and again up the top we have the Quadra 950 information tag. So you can see the Macintosh Quadra 950 assembled in USA. Interestingly enough, I actually thought most of Apple's production was transferred out of the US by this time, but obviously they were still making their high-end systems in the USA. So M4300 model, all the other information there, copyright 1992 Apple computer. And just behind here is well, there's not much. In fact, that's the where the hard drive mounts, in fact. Over here we have the side panel, one of the little buttons you have to push to remove the side cover. And down here we have the air outlet for the built-in power supply. And in fact, it's worth noting the power supply for the 950 actually runs the entire depth of the case. It runs from front to back, so it's quite a large unit. Then over here we have the various ports. So we have video out, we have the AAUI connector for Ethernet, external SCSI, printer and modem ports, ADB port, and here we have what I believe are composite video in and out ports, which again I didn't read about when I looked up the specs on the Quadra 950. And then we have audio input and output as well. Then we go back up. Over here we've got the power inlet and monitor power output connectors. And then here we have the 5 NuBus slot expansion slot covers. So this one's occupied by an Ethernet card, and this one is actually occupied by an ISDN card, which I'll show you a little bit later. And over here we have the serial number and production information tags. So look at this one. This machine would have been built in the 24th week of 1993 in Apple's Fremont, California plant. And then right at the bottom we have the port for a security cable lock. So that's the rear view of the Macintosh Quadra 950. So now we will take it apart. Now, because of the size of the Quadra 950, I should say, I'm having to use a slightly different camera angle here, and hopefully you'll be able to see what I'm doing. But the machine itself is physically that large that it's quite hard to get it all in shot. But I've actually laid the 950 on its side, so the front panel is here, the rear is over here, and the very first step in taking a 950 apart is to take off the side panel. To do that, there are 2 plastic clips. One's actually broken off here, but one's here, and the other one would normally sit about here. So you push in on these clips, and then you can release the back of the side cover and then carefully lift it out. So we'll get that out of the way. So I'll just rotate this back to where it was. Okay, so what we have here is, so we've got the front panel over here, the built-in speaker, motherboard down here, expansion cards here. The power supply is this unit here, and up the top is the cradles that carry the floppy drive, optional 5¼ inch device, and the hard drive back here. So what we'll do first is we'll disconnect all of these cables that are running across the power supply. So first of all, the power for the floppy drive and hard drive, they terminate here, so we can just unplug these, just like that. Move them out of the way, and we'll unplug the floppy drive data cable from the main board. Just unhook it from there and get that out of the way. And the same with the SCSI connector for the hard disk. We'll just carefully pull on that to release it. Move that out of the way. Okay, and now we can unhook actually I'll take the NuBus cards out first so you've got a better view of what I'm doing. So with the NuBus cards, you simply pull on them to release them. So that's one card, that's the ISDN card, which I'll show you in a moment. And we have another card here, an Ethernet card. We'll just pop that out. There it is. Okay, now what we'll do is we'll take out the power supply. And to do that, we've got the main power connector here for the logic board, a bit like a big ATX connector. So we'll just push on the tab and carefully remove that. So at this point, we can take out the power supply. Now to remove the power supply, we have to take out a few screws, and the power supply should then slide forwards, and using these 2 cable ties, we should be able to lift it out of the case. So let me find a screwdriver, a Phillips head, and we'll take these screws out. We've got one here, one over here, and I believe we have to take these out as well. In fact, I think we have to remove, possibly we have to remove this one and this one, but I'm not quite sure. We'll start with these 2 here at the back and see what we get. Okay, I've taken those 2 screws out. Now, can we move the power supply forward? It doesn't appear that we can. I think we may have to remove some more screws. Let me try. Let me see. We may have to take these out as well. Let's take these out. Okay, so those screws are out, so... okay. Well, it looks as though you have to take the hard drive bracket out first, because by removing this one screw here, the hard drive bracket is now loose. We can pull that out, so we'll just carefully unhook the power and data cables from the hard disk. That's now out, so there's the hard disk out of the Quadra. We'll put that over here. So I would say you also have to, we should be able to pull up on this to remove it, but we may have to slide it back first. I'm not sure. We'll just take all these cables out while we're here just to get them out of the way. We'll just disconnect the data cables for the CD-ROM and the floppy drive. Okay, now, let's see what's just happened. This entire assembly can now slide back, as you can see, and we lift the entire bracket out of the Quadra. There we go. So what we have here is we have the, take this off, this is the main bracket that supports the hard drive, floppy drive and CD-ROM, and this is the bracket that fits onto it. So obviously you line them up like this and simply slide it into place, like that. So we'll put those aside. So at this point, getting the power supply out, let's have a look. We have another screw hidden under the front cover. So we'll take the front cover off, and to do that there are two plastic tabs. There's one here and one up here. We carefully push up on them, and the front cover should release. There are two more as well down here that I didn't see. Just carefully lever them out. Oh, we'll unplug the speaker. Speaker is connected down here. We'll unplug that. So I'll just carefully lever these plastic tabs. Of course, when I move one, the other one snaps into place. Be very careful with this. Don't want to break these tabs. There we are. So that's the front panel removed. And at this point I can see another screw we have to remove up here to take out the power supply. So we'll take that out now, and hopefully I should be able to lift the power supply and its bracket straight out of the system. Let's see. Oh, hold on. No, before we do that, we have to take off this cover plate because the corner of the power supply bracket is catching on it. So we just carefully remove the bezel there for the CD-ROM drive. Now we should be able to lift the power supply out. And there it is. And I have to tell you, this is a very large and heavy power supply. It's very, very, very large, and big fan on it too, if you can see that. So we'll put the power supply down. So what we have left, by the looks of it, inside is the logic board, but we have the key switch connector. We'll just unplug that from the top there. We have the light pipe for the power LED, but I think that can stay with the case. Right, so what else do we need to do? I think all we have to do now is to probably pop out the reset and interrupt switches up here. So I think we have to squeeze in on the two sides of the tab there, because the board will have to slide in this direction in order to come out. So what I'll do is carefully push in on these little tabs on either side of the switch to release it. Again, I have to be very careful because this plastic can become quite brittle with age. Okay, that one is now, that one's out. And that one's out. Good, so there are the reset and interrupt switches removed. Now at this point I should be able to slide the board forwards and remove it from the case. So if you look, there is a clip at the front here, which I believe is keeping the board in position. So if I push down on that clip, I should be able to slide the board forwards. Let's see if I'm right. I have to be very careful here. Oh, there it goes. Board's now slid forward. If I lift up on it carefully, it should come straight out. And there we are. There is the logic board out of the out of the Quadra 950. And that's about it. It looks as though nothing else can be removed from the case, because this lower plastic panel appears to be soldered, if you're plastic soldered, to the bottom of the main casing. So that's about it. So that's the Quadra 950 all disassembled. So what we'll do now is look at some of the parts. Okay, well first we have the logic board out of the Quadra 950. So let's go for a little tour and see what's on here. So starting from up here, we have the reset and interrupt switches along with the VRAM battery holder. That's the speaker connector there. Power LED. And here we have the 4 slots for expansion of the onboard VRAM, and we have the onboard VRAM down here. And I think that's probably the digital to analog converter, I think, for the onboard video, I believe. That would be the Ethernet controller there. Let's move across. We've got the clock crystals here. One there, one there. So I think one of those is for the, one could be for the Ethernet, possibly. Not sure about that. Looks like a glue logic chip there. That'd be the CPU clock crystal, the 66 megahertz crystal, and the main CPU is just below it. So this is the Motorola 68040. It's actually hiding under the heatsink. Let me see if I can remove that carefully so you can get a better shot. Just a second. Okay, well I've removed the heatsink off the CPU and cleaned up all the heatsink compounds so you can see the CPU itself. So this is the 33 megahertz 68040 CPU, as you can see. And one thing to note, that if you're looking at a 68040 CPU and in the description it says 68LC040, that's actually a sign that you've got one of the lower cost versions of the 040 that didn't have a built-in FPU, because Motorola did make a cheaper version of the 040 for lower-end machines such as the Macintosh LC series, where they didn't include an onboard floating point unit. But this being a Quadra, it has the full 040 chip. So that's the CPU. Now I've actually had to turn the board upside down so you could see that. So let me turn the board the right way up again, and we'll carry on. Okay, so that was the CPU. Let's see, more glue logic there, I think. This, I believe, is one of the 2 onboard SCSI controllers that are used, because remember the Quadra 950 has 2 independent SCSI buses. Another clock crystal there. Not sure what that is. Could be the sound chip, possibly. Not sure what that is either. There's the other SCSI controller sitting there, and one of the internal SCSI connectors there. Now if we move across, there's the power supply connector there. And let's see what else we got here. We have the I think that's a ROM expansion slot there, that first one you can see there, because there are your 2 ROM chips, one there and one there. There's the floppy connector. then we have the 16 SIM slots for memory expansion. But notice they're only 30-pin SIMs. But the Quadra, being a full 32-bit CPU, you have to install these in banks of 4. So you can see there we have bank A, bank B, bank C, and bank D. No, sorry, you have to install them in pairs, not in groups of 4, sorry. But you have to install them in pairs. So, sorry, no, you do have to install them in groups of 4. What am I saying? You do have to install them in groups of 4, because bank A is the two top SIM slots and the bottom 2. Then bank B, it looks like we have the top slots 3 and 4 in the top row, and slots 3 and 4 in the bottom row, and so on and so on. So I think we've got, not sure how much we've got there. I think we've got another, looks like probably another 6 meg of memory up there, maybe. Not sure, but we'll find out when we power it on. What's that? That's the audio connector. Probably for the CD-ROM audio, if a CD-ROM drive was fitted. Speaker connector there. Some more glue logic chips there. I don't actually, that could be a DSP for the onboard AV support, possibly. I'm not sure about that. There's the PDS slot there for installing a level 2 cache or upgrading the CPU. There's the other SCSI controller, SCSI connector there, and here we have the 5 NuBus expansion slots. As you can see, they're all there. And over here we have various other chips. I'm not really sure what these all do, but yeah. And on this side we have all the various ports. Okay, so that is the logic board out of the Macintosh Quadra 950. So what we'll look at next, let's look at the hard drive next. Here is the hard disk out of the Quadra 950, and you can see it's an IBM SCSI disk, and the model is a DPES 31080, which I think means 3 platters and 1080 megabytes in capacity. Now, I'm pretty sure this was the drive that was originally bundled with the Quadra 950, because you could order a 1 gigabyte drive with this model, but there's no Apple logo on the label, because I do know that some OEMs who manufacture drives for Apple, such as Quantum, actually have a special label with an Apple sticker on there to indicate that it is in fact an Apple OEM part. But this one doesn't appear to have that. But pretty sure it was the drive that was bundled with the Quadra. Now, if we turn it around, just look at the controller itself. You notice that by the early 90s, these drives had fairly well integrated controller logic, so there's really not much on here. So we've got the 50-pin SCSI port at the top, and all the various controller ICs there, and that's the connector that leads to the inside of the drive itself. And let's see what else. We've got the jumpers up here to set SCSI ID and probably termination. And it's actually an interesting point to note about the Quadra 900 and 950. Because the way their SCSI buses are organised, any hard drive you install into the system on the primary SCSI bus must have its termination turned off, because apparently the bus is terminated on the motherboard side. Not sure why that is, but certainly with this drive, the termination jumper is not installed, and that, I believe, is how it was set at the factory. So it's something to keep in mind there. Okay, so that's the hard disk. So let's now have a look at the expansion cards. Now, the first expansion card we pulled out of the 950 is an Ethernet card. It's a NuBus card. It's a Farallon Fast Ether TX10100, which incidentally uses the old 3-COM parallel tasking chipset. So there's really not much on the card. It's actually very well integrated. You've got probably a ROM, probably a boot ROM over here. Looks like a custom IC there. Main controller there, and clock crystal, then not much else. As you can see, this card does not have the 10 base 2 connector on it. It's only the 10 base T twisted pair, because I believe by this time that was really the established standard for Ethernet networks. So the other card that we've got in the Quadra 950 is a card I've not seen before in any other Macintosh. It's actually an ISDN card. So if we look at the card itself, it is a Planet ISDN 2B. And so it's quite a heavily populated card. And on the back we have an RJ12 connector, along with an RJ45 connector, and there we go. There's the company who sold it. I doubt they're still in business somehow, but it's possible. So unfortunately, I don't have any software to go with this, but it'd be a bit hard to test anyhow these days. So that's the expansion cards out of the Quadra 950, and now what we'll do is have a look at that huge power supply. Now obviously Apple intended the Quadra 950 to be used not only as a high-end workstation but also a server, and of course if you're going to have a server you need a big beefy power supply to handle all the expansion cards and disks that you might put into the machine, and this one certainly fits the bill. If we have a look, the actual power supply casing is in fact from here to about here. So, but it comes, the bracket itself is bolted to the power supply casing. If you look at the specification label, so there's the details there of the power supply, but you can see that it is a total output, focus, total output of 303 watts, which for a system of this age is quite impressive. I mean, most Macintosh models, I think, barely have an 80 or 100 watt power supply. So this one's actually quite capable. So you can see that it can put out up to 33 amps on the 5 volt line, and up to 5 amps on each of the 12 volt lines. So it's certainly a very capable power supply. But strangely enough, there's no indication on the label as to who actually manufactures it. You can see that it has a model number and an Apple part number, but it doesn't actually state who made it. Now, I do know that at this time, there were a few companies who made power supplies for Apple. Sony did, TDK did, Aztec did, GE did. There were quite a few, but there's really no indication on here as to who made this power supply. There were no other labels anywhere else that I can find. And notice there's the connector, the main power supply connector, along with the connections for the various disk drives you may have in the system. But there are no other labels anywhere on the power supply, so it's quite odd. Well, actually, no, there is one. In fact, there is a label. Let's put this down. There is a label just up here, which looks like it's nothing more than a manufacturing code stamp or something like that. But it certainly is a very tough power supply. And so if you look at the size of the fan on it, you'll see that it's designed to move quite a bit of air through it. And there's the rear view of it. You can see inside. Okay, there we go. Right, so that was the Macintosh Quadra 950. So in the next video, I'll reassemble the Quadra 950, start it up, and as always, tried a couple of old games. So hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for part 2.